Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on, where you are in this world. God bless you. This is Gloria White coming to you from Utah, USA. Today we're going to be continuing in the New Jerusalem Holy Bible, and we are in First Maccabees, and we are continuing in chapter 10 at verse 67. Now here's the subtitle for this is Demetrius II, Apollonius, governor of Coele-Syria, defeated by Jonathan. In the year 165, Demetrius, son of Demetrius, came from Crete to the land of his ancestors. When King Alexander heard of it, he was plunged into doom and retired to Antioch. Demetrius confirmed Apollonius as governor of Coele-Syria. The latter assembled a large force, encamped at Jamnia, and sent the following message to Jonathan the high priest. You are entirely alone in rising against us, and now I find myself ridiculed and reproached on your account. Why do you use your authority to our disadvantage in the mountains? If you are so confident in your forces, come down now to meet us on the plain, and let us take each other's measure there. On my side, I have the strength of the towns. Ask and learn who I am and who the others supporting us are. You will hear that you cannot stand up to us, since your ancestors were twice routed on their own ground. Nor will you now be able to withstand the cavalry, or so great an army on the plain, where there is neither rock nor stone nor refuge of any kind. On hearing this, Apollonius's words, Jonathan's spirit was roused. He picked 10,000 men and left Jerusalem, and his brother Simon joined him with reinforcements. He drew up his forces outside Joppa, the citizens having shut him out, since Apollonius had a garrison in Joppa. When they began the attack, the citizens took fright and opened the gates, and Jonathan occupied Joppa. Hearing this, Apollonius marshaled 3,000 cavalry and a large army and made his way to Astus, as though intending to march through, while in fact pressing on into the plain, since he had a great number of cavalry on which he was relying. Jonathan pursued him as far as Astus, where the armies joined battle. Now Apollonius had left 1,000 horsemen in concealment behind them. Jonathan knew of this enemy position behind him. The horsemen surrounded his army, firing their arrows into the men from morning till evening. But the troops stood firm, as Jonathan had ordered. Once the cavalry was exhausted, Simon sent his troops into attack against the phalanx, which to be cut to pieces and routed. The cavalry scattered over the plain and fled to Astus, where they took sanctuary in Beth Dagon, the temple of their idol. Jonathan, however, set fire to Astus and the surrounding towns, plundered them, and burned down the temple of Dagon, with all the fugitives who had crowded into it. The enemy losses, counting those who fell by the sword and those burnt to death, totaled about 8,000 men. Jonathan then left and pitched camp outside Ascalon, where the citizens came out to meet him with great ceremony. Jonathan then returned to Jerusalem with his followers, laden with booty. In the event when King Alexander heard what had happened, He awarded Jonathan further honors. He sent him the golden brooch, the kind customarily presented to the king's cousins, and gave him propriety rights over Ekron and the land adjoining it. Subtitle: Ptolemy the Sixth supports Demetrius II, but dies, as does Alexander Ballas. The king of Egypt then assembled an army as numerous as the sands of the seashore, with many ships, and set out to take possession of Alexander's kingdom by a ruse and add it to his own kingdom. He set out for Syria with protestations of peace, and the people of the towns opened their gates to him and came out to meet him, since King Alexander's orders were to welcome him. Ptolemy being his father-in-law, on entering the towns, however, Ptolemy quartered troops as a garrison in each one. When he reached Astus, he was shown the burnt-out temple of Dagon, with Astus and its suburbs in ruins, corpses scattered here and there, and the charred remains of those whom Jonathan had burnt to death in the battle, piled into heaps along his route. They explained to the king what Jonathan had done, hoping for his disapproval, but the king said nothing. Jonathan went into state to meet the king at Joppa, where they greeted each other and spent the night. Jonathan accompanied the king as far as the river called Eleutherius, and then returned to Jerusalem. King Ptolemy, for his part, occupied coastal towns as far as Seleucia on the coast, all the while maturing his wicked designs against Alexander. He sent envoys to King Demetrius to say, "Come and let us make a treaty. I shall give you my daughter, whom Alexander now has, and you shall rule your father's kingdom. I regret having given my daughter to that man, since he has tried to kill me. He made his accusation because he coveted his kingdom. Having carried off his daughter and bestowed her on Demetrius, he broke with Alexander, and their enmity became open. Ptolemy next entered Antioch and assumed the crown of Asia. He now wore on his head the two crowns of Egypt and Asia. King Alexander was in Cilicia at the time, since the people of those parts had risen in revolt. But when he heard the news, he advanced on his rival to give battle, while Ptolemy, for his part, also took the field, met him with a strong force, and routed him. Alexander fled to Arabia for refuge, and King Ptolemy reigned supreme. Zabdiel the Arab cut off Alexander's head and sent it to Ptolemy. 3 days later, King Ptolemy died, and the Egyptian garrisons in the strongholds were killed by the local inhabitants. So Demetrius became king in the year 167. Subtitle: Early Relations Between Demetrius and Jonathan. As the time came, Jonathan mustered the men of Judea for an assault on the citadel of Jerusalem, and they set up numerous siege engines against it. But the renegades who hated their nation made their way to the king and told him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. The king was angered by the news. No sooner had he been informed than he set out and came to Ptolemais. He wrote to Jonathan, telling him to raise the siege and to meet him for a conference in Ptolemais as soon as possible. When Jonathan heard this, he gave orders for the siege to continue. He then selected a deputation from the elders of Israel and the priests, and took the deliberate risk of himself taking silver and gold, clothing, and numerous other presents, and going to Ptolemais to face the king, whose favor he succeeded in winning. And although one or two renegades of his nation brought charges against him, the king treated him as his predecessors had treated him, and promoted him in the presence of all his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood and whatever other distinctions he already held, and had him ranked among the first friends. Jonathan asked the king to exempt Judea and the 3 Samaritan districts from taxation, promising him 300 talents in return. The king consented and wrote Jonathan a rescript covering the whole matter in these terms: a new charter favoring the Jews. King Demetrius, to Jonathan his brother, and to the Jewish nation, greetings. We have written to Lasthenes, our cousin, concerning you, and now send you this copy of our rescript for your own information. King Demetrius, to his father Lasthenes, greetings. The nation of the Jews is our ally. They fulfill their obligations to us, and in view of their goodwill towards us, we have decided to show them our bounty. We confirm them in their possession of the territory of Judea and the 3 districts of Apharima, Lydia, and Ramathiah, these were annexed to Judea from the Samaritan territory, with all their dependencies, in favor of all who offer sacrifice in Jerusalem, instead of the royal dues which the king formerly received from them every year, from the yield of the soil and the fruit crops. As regards our other rights over the tithes and taxes due us, over the salt marshes, and the crown taxes due to us, as from this day we release them from them all. None of these grants will be revoked henceforth or anywhere. You will make yourself responsible for having a copy of this made, to be given to Jonathan and display on the holy mountain in a conspicuous place. And I think we have little time to get one more subsection in. Demetrius II rescued by Jonathan's troops at Antioch. When King Demetrius saw that the country was at peace under his rule, and that no resistance was offered him, he dismissed his forces and sent all the men home, except for the foreign troops that he had recruited in the foreign land, thus incurring the enmity of the veterans who had served his ancestors. Now, Tryphos, one of Alexander's former supporters, noting that all the troops were muttering against Demetrius, went to see Elicu, the Arab who was bringing up Antiochus, Alexander's young son, and repeatedly urged him to let him have the boy, so that he might succeed his father as king. He told him of Demetrius' decision and of the resentment it had aroused among his troops. He spent a long time there. Jonathan, meanwhile, sent to ask King Demetrius to withdraw the garrisons from the citadel in Jerusalem and from the other fortresses, since they were constantly fighting Israel. Demetrius sent word back to Jonathan, "Not only will I do this for you and for your nation, but I shall heap honors on you and your nation if I find a favorable opportunity. For the present, you would do well to send me reinforcements, since all my troops have deserted." Jonathan sent 3,000 experienced soldiers to Antioch. When they reached the king, he was delighted at their arrival. The citizens crowded together in the center of the city to the number of some 120,000, intending to kill the king. The king took refuge in the palace, and while the citizens occupied the thoroughfares of the city and began to attack. The king then called on the Jews for help, and these all rallied round him, then fanned out through the city, and that day killed about 100,000 of its inhabitants. They fired the city, seizing a great deal of plunder at the same time, and secured the king's safety. When the citizens saw that the Jews had the city at their mercy, their courage failed them, and they made an abject appeal to the king. "Give us the right hand of peace, and let the Jews stop their fight against us and the city." They threw down their arms and made peace. The Jews were covered in glory in the eyes of the king and of everyone else in his kingdom. Having won renown in his kingdom, they returned to Jerusalem laden with booty. Thus King Demetrius sat all the more securely on his royal throne, and the country was quiet under his government. But he gave the lie to all the promises he had made, and changed his attitude to Jonathan, giving nothing in return for the services Jonathan had rendered him, but thwarting him at every turn. Wow. That's gratitude, huh? Well, that just tells you what kind of man Demetrius is. And as always, I love you.